Hello, my name is Matt Maher, aka Imp, and this is Imp's WWE Adventure Podcast on the Social Suplex Podcast Network, your quick look back at the WWE week that was, and what a week it was. SmackDown tribute to the troops, NXT deadline, CM Punk on Monday Night Raw. Unfortunately, my voice is still not 100%, as you can feel it going again. I got to 40 seconds before instead of 20 seconds, so I've doubled my progress. So anyway, let's not waste any time. Like this show, got any form of time wasting at all. Just hits 30 minutes, right, I'm out of here. This is the shortest show on the Social Suplex Podcast Network, but I get quite some margin, so keep to it and jump right into Friday Night SmackDown.
It is a truly special night from Providence, Rhode Island. Welcome, folks, to the 21st annual Tribute to the Troops here on Friday Night SmackDown.
The US Military Propaganda Edition of Friday Night SmackDown. And I'm not American. Whenever I see this stuff, it's just American propaganda stuff. American military propaganda is you don't adhere to our military propaganda. You don't adhere to the UK military propaganda, so I can take the piss out of the American ones. It's good PR for WWE, and as you will see throughout this my review, and of course if you watch the show as well, they knew which demographic they were hitting for with these specials. They knew what they're hitting home at. Anyway, we'll say the special feeling to the presentation was genuinely well done. Jokes aside, and all that stuff. But you know what? They made this show feel like a special episode of SmackDown. Makes you question why this annual tradition hasn't just always been a telly special like this, with all the different versions. I know there was the kind of visual difference of being generally out there in the noughties, but there's with the most recent years where it's just kind of not really anything at all, or an unaired thing, or just a special tacked on in the later Vince eras. This feels like they took this idea and it makes you question why this hasn't been this the entire time. You watch this show and it's just why hasn't this been what Jimmy Chooks has been the entire time it's been existing? The working of Triple H or Nick Khan, whoever's made it like this, give you applause, because this was genuinely well done. And an actually great musical performance. The special feeling to the presentation was genuinely well done. And like I say, when I say it's an actually great musical performance, don't forget, I'm not American. Those people singing the America song, there is no emotional attachment to that for me. It is just a song. And I was that was a great performance. Even I was that's good. I can tell that they did that well. But the special feeling to the presentation was all there. When I was talking about finding space on the show with better time management last week, this show is a great example of exactly that. The flow building up to the main event throughout was perfectly well done. As soon as they'd finished their musical performances to kick us off, play the country music and then bring out a foreigner for them to boo. Trips knows what demo this is playing for. Lacey Evans crowd, baby. The US Championship Tournament, Santos Escobar versus Dragon Lee. A match that's, why not just run it again? This time with Dom Mysterio out. He's out there to taunt and integrate promotion for NXT Deadline. Decent match, with a kinda sudden finish, Dragon Dick draped in the corner and lifted off into a Phantom Driver. The fans were chanting for JBL and Dom Dom anyway. Hey, after years of conditioning your viewers to not really care about the matches, it'll take years to condition it out. Anyway, Cody Rhodes almost convinced me to vote Republican with his thing. Somewhat, as well, undermining the whole thing of Randy Orton and CM Punk going to different shows to decide who they're going to sign for. Cody can just come on to whatever show he wants to. So I can make that joke about his promo segment. Bobby Lashley out as the military's #1 babyface to beat up Karrion Kross. A spear for the troops, called the football commentator man. Again, not American. Do not know who that man was. He seemed like the people watching the show would appreciate it. CM Punk out on SmackDown, proof WWE stands on Twitter as such a small percentage of WWE fans with the CM Punk promo. Loud reception, rightfully turned up in the truck. And for me, the absolute much better placing in the card as well. Him at the end of the show with his time cut on Raw, even CM Punk addressed it here. It's in that slot. Wasn't really the right slot for returning CM Punk to be. Right here, where it was placed in the show, just in the middle of the running, far better. And they did it again on Monday Night Raw, more within the middle of the show, and it gave him a lot more time to breathe for Seth Rollins. Here, it was given a bit more time to breathe as well, but it was also in the middle of the show, so it fit the structure so much better rather than building up to him, and then he gets whatever's left remaining on the show. And it helps build to the main event that was coming as well. He's part of the elevation of the hype. When CM Punk comes out, the show will kick up another gear, just send us into that main event. The crowd just had no idea what CM CM Punk was talking about with his AEW bit, like talking to Kevin Owens, like, can I trust a guy who punches people in the back? It got no pop. Nothing. The crowd were all there for the rest of the promo though, so I'm not going to paint it as a bad promo. They were all there for it, especially for him calling out the top WWE names, like they want to see CM Punk versus ... And this was obviously setting up what he was going to do on Monday. Importantly, for the road we apparently seem to be headed to, the crowd were really hot for the shots at Seth. They continued to get really loud reactions, and that built up really nicely to Monday Night Raw. And he made his character's goals clear, that his aim is to main event WrestleMania. Cody was all about finishing the story, or is still all about finishing the story, while CM Punk is about main eventing WrestleMania. And that means you're setting up so many different worlds for who the Royal Rumble winner could be as well. Right now, you've just got CM Punk and Cody Rhodes. You've got finishing the story, and you've got main eventing WrestleMania. At the moment, both men are top candidates to win. However, the thing that WWE and Trips has got on their side is the fact that they are so far out from the Royal Rumble. You can now, like, maybe just each week dedicate a little bit of time to one person just to get across their character's goal to try and convince us they could be a Royal Rumble winner, or at least in contention, or at least an important character come the mass Battle Royal occasion. You've got more than enough time to do this. And even if you do just build it off of Cody or CM Punk, either man is a legit contender, and you just listen to the vibes of the crowd to pick which one you go with, because they're both going to be challenged for the title anyway. That kind of thing. Like, honestly, in the end, it's something to get the crowd invested when it doesn't really matter who wins. You just go with the vibes of the crowd. Like, are they going to cheer for there all the time, Cody Rhodes, or the guy that's just returned CM Punk? I've simplified it down quite a bit, but there's still more than it was to talk about. We'll get to it. Later in the show, Cody got his contract offer from Nick Aldis, and Cody popping in for a quick wah-wah, Alan. Charlotte, Bianca and Shotzi find friends in Zelina Vega and Mia Yim to even the numbers game for damage control. Bayley, the MVP different maker, again causing the distraction win. And the main event was Randy Pandy and versus my voice can't do it versus Solo and Jimmy Uso. And yeah, perfectly fine main event, cementing Randy Orton as the guy going for Roman Reigns, I'm assuming at the Royal Rumble, but you got to do the slow road to get there, and part one is winning a tag team match against Solo and Jimmy. The show overall was paced so well over the course of it, and they made the Tribute to the Troops special generally feel like a big occasion. But in terms of like the vibe for the entire show, it really worked. Like, as well, just little touches like having the augmented reality next match coming up thing just be helicoptered in. I was just like, these are ticking all the right vibes for what this special is kind of meant to be. They got it again. There's a reason that it's country music. There's a reason they picked JBL to be on this show, bringing on the Texan drawl. It's like it was a show that knew which crowd it was aiming for and just hit it. It just went for it and just hit that crowd. So in terms of like a production, they absolutely nailed it. I can't argue they didn't nail the production for the Tribute to the Troops. They knew exactly what they were doing and they went all in. I generally enjoyed this episode of SmackDown. Anyway, no messing about. Let's move over to Monday Night Raw, because Monday Night Raw itself was no messing about. Let's vibe on over to Monday Night.
Let me make one thing perfectly clear. I don't want there to be any confusion. I know I'm a bit worked up. I want everybody to understand I'm going to say it plainly with every fiber in my being. I hate you.
No messing about. This week's Raw immediately flew into what last week was setting up. And of course, Seth and CM Punk. Which brand will CM Punk sign for? It was the setup for this segment, but it led into an absolutely amazing promo, of which I played a clip for, obviously, before coming into this. Like, he and Randy choosing their brands being made such a big deal of was somewhat undermined by folk appearing on the other show willy-nilly, like, over the course of, like, the past few years. But, like, sure, whatever. As long as there's consistency here, because it's... But sure, whatever. As long as there's consistency here on... Wait, what do you mean Cody was on SmackDown? This week? That said, having Punk signed for Raw in the exact same building he walked out of 10 years ago is a great stroke of booking. That's just great writing. This is really solid stuff. Like, signing the contract brings out his most vocal adversary, Seth freaking Rollins. And in terms of like the character of Seth Rollins, giving him a trait in common with Drew, who is currently kind of feuding with towards the Royal Rumble. I say one, they've got a match on day one. or Day One Raw, I think they're calling it this year. Like, with like that trait in common with Drew in his dislike for CM Punk, and that's another really nice touch. Obviously, the man himself, if he generally does hate CM Punk, and I thought the delivery of that line here, it was so good. But like the man who made this place his house taking full offence at Punk calling it his home, Seth delivering the "I hate you" line really well. Like the somewhat understated nature of it, instead of going full angry, like shouty shout, like the understated nature sold the hate so well. Just letting it go quiet for a second and delivering it, really well done. Applause to Seth Rollins, really well done. And like going by the crowd reactions as they just stared down at each other, like, oh yeah, there's your WrestleMania main event feeler given a resounding approval. Obviously, the question of CM Punk talking about wanting to main event WrestleMania, does night one count? it's a little debate of we're still into this new era of WrestleMania double nights, and the first two under Vince. Obviously, the first one was in the pandemic era, so it's got massive. Well, I say no, that's not true, because Bianca versus Sasha felt like a big main event, felt like a big deal. And on the show itself, obviously the booking was a bit, but that doesn't really matter. On the show itself, it felt like a big main event thing. Then the second one was like the Texas WrestleMania was like a last gasp kind of show that only Vince McMahon could put on, because it was so full of just like what craziness that only Vince would put on. And part of that was the Kevin Owens Steve Austin main event with the question mark of what do you mean this is the main event? It's kind of just vibes before you went in, and then it's just a blast of silly fun. And that was, yeah, so that meant, but I feel like, but him doing that has meant that night one doesn't particularly feel like the main event. And I feel like for that WrestleMania, that was the danger of that precedent. Kevin Owens versus Steve Austin was like a fun way to end the show that the crowd definitely vibed with, but it also hurt the perception of the night one also being a WrestleMania main event. The first one with Bianca Sasha sold it like that. This year with the Usos versus Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn also sold it like that. So we're 2 for 1. And I feel like if you do CM Punk Seth Rollins as well, over time both nights will feel like main event big deals. For me, it's because there was one under Vince's gasp as he's having everything taken away from him. The consequences finally get to him, and he puts on just a bonkers WrestleMania. Yeah, but it did hurt the perception of night one being also a big deal. So yeah, I think over time that's going to correct itself, and this is part of it. And it also helps legitimise Seth's championship, which has felt like a secondary prize in a way, whilst Roman Reigns has been holding on to his title, and he give Seth Rollins a consolation prize almost in this title. He's doing everything he can to make it not feel that way. Stuff like this is a huge way to help compensate for that, to really help elevate it. Maybe that's why CM Punk winning the Royal Rumble is a good idea, because that means the Royal Rumble winner goes after that title. But it's also like there's Elimination Chamber in Australia. There's so many different ways you can do this, and I think you really could just use the crowd vibes and choose which one wins the Elimination Chamber, which one wins the Rumble. Obviously, I've realised there were other asterisks as well. Like, well, if the Royal Rumble winner goes after the title that Seth's holding, that helps elevate his title. Stuff like that. Or does the Royal Rumble winner go for the true main event on night 2 against Roman? Like, I don't know. But yeah, this promo, absolutely amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Both guys really got their chance to voice their grievances. Somewhat feeling like 2 people who had the genuine grievance, just get them out there and get it kind of addressed and just talk about it out there in the ring. Just like pull yourself together and just do this for the business. And the reception is like you can make money. The crowd really wants to see these two. That's it. Anyway, speaking of people that the crowd want to see, McIntyre versus Jey Uso. This time, not part of a bigger story, like no other folk interfering, only Drew and his determination to hurt Mr. Yeetman. But big old cheating Scotsman clawing at a thumb at the Usos' eyes to then fly in with a Claymore. Clever distraction with the turnbuckle pad being taken off, only for that to just be a distraction and do something more visceral as the ref fixed it. They're thumbing the eye of the Uso to take the Claymore win. It's one of those where McIntyre wanted to hurt Jey Uso, and he has the opportunity to actually fly into the match clean, but then takes the opportunity to actually just thumb his eye, hurt him, and then Claymore him. Commentators taking that as him cheating to give the win, but I personally would have liked the idea of he just lean into the visceral nature of what he did with the thumb. He doesn't want to just beat Jey Uso. He wants to viscerally hurt him. But like everything about it, the interview afterwards, the way it was spinning was McIntyre falling deeper into not really caring for his opponents that much, and doing whatever it takes to get the win. Like leaning further into the heel character rather than leaning further into wanting to hurt Jey Uso. Which in my world, that's because when this match happened, they were in my head they were building to Seth versus Drew at the Royal Rumble, and I was like, oh, you got plenty of time to build up the more heely side of Drew McIntyre. I wouldn't mind him just going after Jey Uso. But the match is taking place on Day 1 Raw, so you haven't actually got that long. So you kind of just need to not have him too distracted away from Seth Rollins. You had this week where they're both kind of building towards each other. And you got CM Punk there in the background as well. Jey Uso obviously faced Seth Rollins, so they're all tied together too. Yeah, there's nice little tie-ins happening. And it's all right. It's all right, guys. One of it was perfectly fine. And the final thing I want to talk about from Raw, Cody Rhodes and Shinsuke Nakamura main event. Feeling like a nice surprise of, oh, they're just getting straight to it. Cool. no dilly-dallying about. Before swerving right into the disqualification with Knackers using the red mist. And hey, those blonde locks covered in red is simply a visual Cody could not put a hype behind since leaving AEW. He just loves it too much, and clearly he's not the only one because production wanted him to do it again. It's the second week in a row Cody takes the red mist from Knackers. And they kind of they sold the stinging of it as well, and taking it as when Nakamura is doing this, it's generally it's not just like a cheeky. It's also meant to like, no, this hurts. This is a thing which like needs to be ice washed out of, like it's a mace or something. Like it's a genuine hurty thing. I thought I do like the idea of cheeky Nakamura. I enjoy it because I'm doing a hand movement and a facial expression that none of you can see, and it makes myself laugh when I do it with cheeky Nakamura. But yeah, that sounds like a great song. Cheeky Nakamura. Anyway, yeah, a perfectly fine main event, which is I thought was like on a show which was like which was telling me we're not going to beat around the bush for stuff. Like you're getting Seth Rollins versus Drew McIntyre on the like day 1 Monday Night Raw, rather than we're having to wait to the end of the month for the Royal Rumble. And we've got a main event with Cody Rhodes and Nakamura, and you got CM Punk, Seth Rollins as well. CM Punk, I forgot to say, CM Punk announcing himself for the Royal Rumble. Like there was a lot of stuff here which felt like this is like just get straight to the point, no hanging about. Like it's one of these shows, like no messing about, getting straight to the bloody point. But then the main event was not that. The main event was a feud stretching out match. The kind of an echo of the Vince era where every show had matches like this. It's like, you know what I have to keep reminding myself is it's absolutely fine to do this kind of thing when you're not doing it multiple times every single week. Like, you know what? It's fine. It's perfectly fine to do one match like this when you haven't done it for weeks, or if not over a month or whatever. It's like, you know what? My instinct is to moan about it, but when it's just the only one, in my world there's no such thing as thing equals bad, just way to do things badly. And this is a thing, an example of the vibe still exists from Vince, and I have to remind myself of that. That's the way I wanted to end Raw. I did enjoy. When I say enjoyed Raw, it started the same problems with a lot of Raws do, where I like that they're dedicating time to certain like mid-card acts and whatever. Like the Alpha Academy stuff still feels really entertaining, and anyone kind of bouncing off of that feels entertaining. Judgment Day getting some nice like lower level character work with the R-Truth stuff, which is much needed after the mass high profile over the course of the summer building into Survivor Series. It's nice for them to take a little bit of a seat back to kind of explore their characters a little bit more to build to the Royal Rumble, especially as that then gives the other characters room to thrive and build in the main event, like to react off of the arrival of CM Punk, to build to Drew McIntyre going after Seth Rollins, with the whole Jey Uso interactions in there as well. Like I'm assuming Sami Zayn would have been a part of this if he didn't get injured last week, but yeah, the Judgment Day just taking that little back seat helps the others to thrive for a bit, and you can also get lower level character work there too. And Rhea Ripley's in that vibe too. She hasn't really got a contender or anything. Like, it feels like the WrestleMania match is Becky Lynch. They just somehow have to get her there, and not make you think that she's just not really been defending the title. It's like, no, just have her out there, have her defeat somebody and go, well, who the hell is going to fight me at the Royal Rumble? Who do you think? Just build up that vibe until we bring somebody out. Again, it feels like Becky's the match at WrestleMania, but some things might change. There might be people coming in the company. We'll find out. Anyway, that was a relatively fun Monday Night Raw. Let's move on to NXT Deadline.
One, I like it. Oh yeah, man.
Superstars go to the penalty box. We're tied at 3. There's 10 seconds. There's 10 seconds. Push. Spear didn't connect. Big knee. Oh my God. He did it. How the hell?
And the Iron Survivor, Trick Williams.
A hell of a men's Iron Survivor challenge at NXT Deadline, and this was the iteration that convinced me of the gimmick. We'll talk about actually. I was going to say, I do want to talk about CM Punk first. Like, you know what? No, I'm going to talk about the men's Iron Survivor because I really enjoyed this. There's no point really me covering NXT that much. It was announced that Carmelo Hayes will be the United States Championship guy. I think they announced that on... What did they announce that on? They announced that on this show, that Carmelo Hayes was going to be the guy in the US title tournament on Friday. I can't remember. They announced it again on NXT. Also, they went... For me, there was that and the NXT Breakout tournament. People was giving them a little bits to kind of figure out what their vibe is when they start their tournament. So really, for me, the important things on that show were not in the ring. It was the stuff around it, which, you know, for the post in this current era for NXT, the post pay-per-view shows aren't always like, they're not the most much-see. So yeah, it would have been a good week for me to do my moaning thing. It's like, actually, this is the week I dive into the why I generally don't enjoy watching NXT that much, and a lot of it's to do with the production. It's like, you know what? No. Unfortunately, the reason NXT wasn't that big of a deal for me to talk about is because NXT Deadline was. So the men's Iron Survivor Challenge, Dijak and Josh Briggs started off. They're big boys. Tyler Bate next, the big strong boy. Trick Williams 10 minutes in after, and it's he came in when it was 1-1 for all the other big lads. Big Bomb Breaker out last, but with his opponents the most knackered. And they successfully used the scoring system to build to an exhilarating finish. The crowd's so firmly behind Trick as the score odds are stacked against him, and the clock just ticks on and on. The crowd's so firmly behind him too. Breaker, when he arrived, immediately spearing and pinning every lad in sight to get 3 points within like 30 seconds. Just arriving with a thump. And Trick, the freshest guy in the penalty box after getting tiger driven by Big Strong Bait. So Breaker's charging in fresh on the 3 more tied men. Then he comes out. It's like, oh yes, I like this. Like, they really use this to perfection. A great sequence with all the lads out of the penalty box too. Where Breaker Frankensteiner sent an opponent into Bates' Tiger Driver. Can't remember which big lad he sent flying, but there was a nice little sequence. The Birmingham man then stealing the pin with that Tiger Driver away from Breaker. The action timed perfectly for the stage to be set at 20 minutes in out of the 25. All 5 lads in the ring as we build to a hectic finish. Trick on 0 at 23 minutes with 2 remaining, with 3 other blokes on 3. The crowd favourite having been speared through the barricade by Breaker, who then himself was immediately chokeslammed through the announce table. Like, all of the pieces for this, like, though the 2 that the crowd are most concerned with are both down on the outside where we hit that final 2 minutes moment, and all these other guys who've also got points are trying to score points on each other. It's a really great way to build up that kind of frenzy feel. All set for the final flash minute. So use that other minute just to get to this flash. As Trick shoots for the stars in a damn exciting last gasp, rolling up Briggs, and then out comes Eddie Thorpe for distraction for Dijak. I say distraction, he properly hit him. And then Trick takes advantage of that, getting his second fall. A final Breaker spear charge countered with the big knee for one hell of a pop, and he gets the win. Trick scoring the final 4th fall and pinning every opponent within 1 minute and getting the win. And the crowd pop was huge. But it was like a proof of a well-booked idea. They carried it out really well. And it's one of those where I feel like it works well too, because they're not waiting till it gets to the final couple of seconds to score the pin right at the end. They're scoring it, and then both lads are down. It's like 4 seconds on the clock. You're like, well, no one's going to get this because everyone's down, and it's just like the You got the huge pop of Trick getting his win, and then the crowd just kind of soaks it in for 4 seconds and then gets a second reaction. I thought it was really well booked. Like last year with this one, I wasn't really watching NXT at the time. I watched the odd show, and then they were doing this gimmick, and I was like, you know what? I'm all for trying to innovate a new idea or something. This is obviously taking a lot of influences from different matches, like almost like a mixture of WWE's Championship Challenge and TNA's King of the Mountain. We put those two together, you get some form of thing like this. And last year, I was like, you know what? It's interesting, but I wasn't vibing with it. This year proved if you book it correctly, then this can be really exciting. I thought the women's one was maybe a bit too practiced at times, so you had people kind of waiting about to do the next spot, but it was still a fun match, and I was even just watching that one, I was like, no, it feels like this concept has been ironed out, pardon the pun, to work well enough on the main roster. Like it'll feel really weird if this just stays in NXT at this point. Like we would watch War Games and we're just like, no, the WWE's way of doing War Games would work on the main roster, and Triple H has just immediately done it with no hesitation, and it clearly seems to be working. This one, I felt like, from when I was watching it last year, I feel like this one kind of needs the booking backing for it to properly create the right vibes, and I feel like the women's one was fun but felt very orchestrated, whilst the men's one fully convinced me of the gimmick. And for me, like, I can't give it any much of a stronger review. It's like it was a match where I was like, hey, you know what? Yeah, it's fine. I'm not desperate to be in the main roster. To watching this version and go, oh wait, no, I'm completely wrong. This gimmick is like they could take this over to the main roster now. Like it has been ironed out. It has been figured out. And I wouldn't mind this process, to be fair. Where if you've got an idea for a big match, but you just feel like it needs to be ironed out, and there's a few little things you want to tweak, or you just want to practice it on a big stage. NXT's the perfect ground for that, and then you can put it onto one like Raw or whatever once it's all been figured out. Like a nice little testing ground for new gimmicks rather than immediately throwing it onto the main roster. It's a benefit of NXT. You can use it to figure out and practice more than just the wrestlers and the production and the commentators, which is already useful, obviously. It doesn't mean like you can actually use concepts like this. Do what you did with War Games and figure out how you can work it within the WWE production, and you can do stuff like this. So yeah. Just don't do the triple cage. Some ideas are fine to die. That's absolutely fine. Or the electric cage or whatever. Like some ideas are perfect. Oh, you bring back the electric cage from TNA, not WCW. No, the TNA one. Oh, that was hilarious. Search it up. And I remember watching it at the time, and because I was younger, I didn't hate the match. I just remember watching it, being behind LAX as the Team 3D are bumping about, and the electric shock stuff was... I don't remember hating it or whatever, but I watched it as an adult. I was just like, oh, this is so stupid. It's so stupid. Not seen it, highly recommend Team 3D LAX electric cage match. So that just means a lot of adult men standing about and shaking about after they take a bump into a steel cage thing, whilst the lights dip down with the sound, and that's meant to get across the fact that they've hit the electric cage, because for some reason it's wired to the lighting system. TNA. Sometimes you just can't help but love them. Anyway, elsewhere on the show, really that's my main thing I want to talk about. Obviously we've got CM Punk and HBK in extremely awkward, what felt like, oh, you happen to be here, why not just go out and vibe with HBK for a bit? Like one of the most unplanned segments they've ever seen. The crowd just get to see CM Punk, and that makes them happy. A nice little way to jolt the show, and to jolt people who weren't watching the show into be like, oh, CM Punk's there. Oh, and suddenly you get 2 million views on YouTube or whatever. Suddenly you get some fraction of those people tuning in to this show itself or whatever later. But actually, I'll be honest, like with NXT, I was going to watch it anyway. But when I saw that CM Punk was there, I was like, oh, they're actually putting effort in here. Oh, that's interesting. Then I want it Raw. It was like, oh, I've had an offer from NXT as well. I was like, have you now, Punk? It's like, it feels super weird. People have just been crossing over from Raw to SmackDown anyway, but now NXT's an option. Again, these big superstars choosing which band they want to sign for would be less undermined if they didn't have people just crossing over willy-nilly anyway. It's not as bad as it was under Vince, but it still happens. It still happens. Anyway, talking about show crossover, Dominic Mysterio, North American Champion for Monday Night Raw, versus Dragon Lee, who has been on Friday Night SmackDown. So neither of these guys really are NXT. But the North American Champion being on main TV is a great crossover kind of way to have the show promoted without it kind of being like NXT's doing this, kind of in your face a bit. Like, no, you naturally see an NXT title there, and their programs therefore naturally get talked about, which is a nice, natural way for the show, for the commentators to bring up NXT. Yeah, I like it. It makes the whole world make sense. The match was absolutely fine, like the standard TV title match or whatever. Dragon Lee winning, your new North American champion. The Women's Iron Survivor Challenge, I've already talked about it quite a bit, good fun. Bea Priestley win, I can't remember what she's called. As I said, still learning names, but I know Bea Priestley from when she was called Bea Priestley. So, whatever her name is now, insert here. Mello versus King, and a very odd match. Like, Mello as the NXT lad in the US title tournament makes sense. Definitely one of the most over and ready guys versus Lexis King, who's arguably the polar opposite. Where it feels weird that I was watching him on AEW Dynamite TV in that tag team, and it felt like he hit a decently good vibe for the level he was at that point in his career. But in NXT, they see him as being like higher place up their card, and then giving him this world kind of vibe off of that. But ironically, he's called King and he's missing. Like, it's just not hitting. And Mello obviously like the much bigger star, but this match really wasn't that much. And I don't know if it's the gimmick. I don't know if it's the beard. It's definitely the beard. There's a lot of unless the point of the character is that he sucks, which it doesn't feel like it is. A lot of the presentation is meant to be like he's meant to be this heel with a cool villainous swagger, but the swagger just isn't. He doesn't naturally ooze it, and it feels very forced. It's compared to Carmelo, where he's like naturally dripping with it, literally dripping. What do you mean? That's not baby oil. He's naturally dripping with that ooze of charisma. Whereas King doesn't really have that, and arguably the gimmick he had in AEW fit where he was at a lot better. This kind of character doesn't really work, and obviously there's the other things like he couldn't put his sunglasses away because his shirt didn't have a pocket. It's just hilarious. It wasn't a real pocket, and he tried to put. Oh, it's so funny. That clip is so funny. But yeah, it's none of the vibes are hitting, and I feel like this match did him no favours either. But Carmelo Hayes, as a nice little swan song for him, it can work. And arguably for me, I'm ready for his story with the Trick and whatever that's building to somewhat wrap up. But that's as someone who's more recently started watching the show. It's like, oh, they're still doing this level of storyline, are they? Okay. I mean, I like both those guys, and the main point of it is Carmelo moving on to SmackDown and Trick being elevated, bouncing off of him, asking John Cena, when do I know it's my time? And then we've just built and jumped forwards with that trajectory the entire time. Then we get Carmelo with his stuff with SmackDown as well. So that means that all the pieces are there for this story to then build to wrapping up. Again, it's just not that intriguing a story either with the who knocked down Trick, but the crowd are so into Trick that I feel like they may even automatically care. So I've talked about this segment way longer than I meant to, but I'm thumbs up for Carmelo and Trick with their character work, and they were both massively improving. Carmelo feeling so ready for One Night Raw. Trick feeling like he still needs more in-ring time in NXT, but his character is absolutely skyrocketing right now, which is a bonus for something like this. Like, there is a precedent for perfectly mediocre or air storylines to really help hone down a character. Just look at Bad Influence, Christopher Daniels and Kazarian, and not like keep bringing up TNA, but Christopher Daniels and Kazarian were born out of the god-awful Claire Lynch storyline. The god-awful storyline with AJ apparently having an affair and all that stuff, and they had the evidence. It was awful. One of the worst things TNA writers ever produced. However, it also gave us Kazarian and Christopher Daniels really finding their groove as a tag team, and it was like the birth of Bad Influence, like, properly. So I was like, it did create something magnificent, even though it was awful. So even though this storyline may not be the best for Trick and Carmelo, it is really helping find both characters for where they're going next, especially Trick, who's going to be like the mainstay on NXT when Carmelo then moves over to SmackDown, I assume. I assume we're building to that point. I mean, it doesn't have to be SmackDown, but the US title tournament could be a nice way to properly introduce him to the audience after his like little showcase NXT stuff earlier in the year. We also had a steel cage match with Kiana James versus Roxanne Perez. I like both women. Again, these are both two of the stronger characters on the show too. and they just struggled to get the fans into this match. Where it was in the card order, part of me was like, I don't think you should have put a steel cage match after the men's Iron Survivor. If this was just like a standard match or no DQ or something, just a little bit of light fun rather than trying to get us to invest in a heated storyline. Like they were way too tired. The men's match was way too good. Unfortunately, though, if you put the men's match after this one, you put it second to last, that means the main event dies. You could put it in the main event, but like there's that thing of the NXT title. Oh, it's got a main event. You could put Carmelo versus King here, but the match would die even more. Yeah, maybe that's what you do. You just like, well, Matt, no, because you weren't intending for King to feel a bit like you weren't intending that. Anyway, the main event as well, Baron Corbin versus Ilya Dragunov for the NXT Championship. NXT has helped reinvigorate Baron Corbin's character a lot. Not that in the Vince series he ever had like strong characters, but like he was a heavy finishes guy, and the fans got extremely tired of him. And then he seemed to find a really good gimmick, and then the Vince didn't care, took him in a completely different direction. Cough, cough. Like broke Corbin into Happy Corbin, and it's like, the first week of Happy Corbin, I was like, this actually bounces off so brilliantly. But afterwards, it was immediately irritating, and then they added Riddick Moss, and I was like, no, this is genuinely grating. This is so bad. This is Vince humour at such a horrific scale. But yeah, it feels like he's been reinvigorated somewhat in NXT. But this match, though, was your perfectly fine match. Like, nothing crazy. One of the weaker Ilya Dragunov paper, because you've kind of come to expect Ilya Dragunov like special NXT matches to have such a strong performance within them, and that would be this really exciting kind of showings. This was fine. Like the performance you expect from an Ilya Dragunov match just wasn't there at all in this match, but it was like a perfectly fine match. Like I might even give a Baron Corbin match 3 stars, which, you know, for a Baron Corbin match, that's pretty rock solid. Is that an agreement, guys? it's pretty rock solid. 3 stars. Out of here. Yes, NXT Deadline. Mostly I just want to talk about the men's Iron Survivor Challenge and kind of like the vibes I'm feeling with NXT at the moment without having to actually review the NXT show. There's a lot of positives coming out of NXT at the moment, but with a lot of, also at the end of the year stuff, when you're reflecting back, I'm seeing a lot of love for NXT over this past year. Whilst me personally, I'm just like, a lot of the production stuff, a lot of the things I don't like that WWE do is really, really highlighted in NXT, and I feel like I need to do that show at some point to say what I'm talking about. but it is, I will admit, it's got when I say it's got an exciting vibe to it, I think the biggest part for it is you watch NXT and you feel like this is the system that this should have been the entire time with NXT. Like an actual feeder system to the main roster, rather than you get to see these really interesting characters birthed and you get that investment in them only for their characters to be absolutely massacred when they get to the main roster and all momentum cut out from under them. All about the visual presentation, the way they're meant to hold themselves or whatever, it's just completely gone. They're completely different characters, nothing crossed over. Or it's just the most basic of stuff, like Bobby Roode's. I know different examples come across, but for me, Bobby Roode, we literally just turned into the guy with the entrance and had like no other character under Vince. It's like, oh dear, that was a shame. That is the end of the show, and I did a big sniffle, about 46 minutes, which means that's really far into the edit. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, with that, I say thank you for listening, liking, engaging in any form, any manner. Always appreciated, never take it for granted. You can follow me on Twitter at the Damn and Cat. Damn as in damn. Not on there as much, but if you DM me or if you send me a tweet, I will see it. You check out the other shows here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Yeah, I'm on this network now. One Nation Radio with Rich and James. Should I try delivering that again without burping? One Nation Radio with Rich and James. All elite things elite with Floyd. Wrestling Art with Chris Sings with Chris Things. Keeping It Strong Style with Jeremy Donovan and young boy Josh Smith. And with that, I bid you adieu. Adios.